Tensions between Russia and the United States are steadily increasing as the war in Ukraine continues, and the latest incident near Alaska has once again highlighted how fragile the situation has become. On September 24, American fighter jets were forced to respond quickly after detecting 4 Russian aircraft approaching Alaska. According to a detailed statement issued by the North American Aerospace Defense Command, the Russian planes were identified as 2 Tu-95 strategic bombers and 2 Su-35 fighter jets. In response to this activity, the United States scrambled a total of 9 aircraft, including an E-3 Sentry Command and Control aircraft, 4 F-16 fighter jets, and 4 KC-135 refueling tankers, in order to intercept and monitor the Russian planes. NORAD officials emphasized that the Russian aircraft remained in international airspace and did not enter U.S. or Canadian territory, noting that such patrols by Russian forces near Alaska are relatively routine and are not in themselves considered a direct threat. Even so, this was the 3rd such encounter in the span of a single month and the 9th time this year that Russian military planes have been intercepted in the region, pointing to a pattern of increasing activity. What made this incident particularly significant was the timing. Just one day before the encounter, President Donald Trump, who recently returned to office, made strong public remarks suggesting that Ukraine had the ability to win back all of the territories seized by Russia. This statement marked a sharp shift from repeated Republican calls for Ukraine to consider territorial concessions in order to end the war. NATO also delivered stern warnings to Moscow, insisting that any violations of Allied airspace would be met with all necessary defensive actions. These warnings followed a series of recent provocations, including the downing of a Russian drone over Poland earlier this month and reported incursions by Russian fighter jets into Estonian airspace only a week earlier. Trump added to the tensions by urging NATO members to be prepared to shoot down any Russian aircraft that attempted to cross into their sovereign airspace. When asked if the United States would stand firmly behind its NATO allies in such a scenario, Trump's response was more cautious, saying that the decision would depend on the circumstances. His remarks were widely interpreted as both a warning to Moscow and a signal of conditional American involvement in future escalations. Only weeks earlier, Trump had held a high-profile summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska. Following that meeting, Trump announced that he was trying to organize direct negotiations between Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, portraying himself as a mediator who could help end the war. However, the Kremlin showed no interest in such talks, and instead Moscow has intensified its bombing campaign across Ukraine, making it clear that it is not ready to reduce hostilities. The sequence of events underscores just how delicate the current moment is. The repeated Russian flights near Alaska, the bold statements from Trump, the warnings from NATO, and the continued escalation of violence in Ukraine all combine to create an atmosphere of heightened danger. While NORAD has described the flights as routine and non-threatening, the broader political and military context makes every encounter more significant than the last. With both superpowers testing each other's resolve and Ukraine still under heavy attack, these developments suggest that the rivalry between Russia and the United States is entering an even more precarious phase, one where even a single miscalculation could have serious consequences for global security.